Long before Beatrix Noll learned that the dead could carry messages, she learned that they could leave questions behind. Her father had been the first. He died when she was 11, after a scaffold collapsed at a mill outside Hartrow. The company called it an accident. The foreman said the supports had been inspected. The town doctor signed a certificate. The mill owner sent a wreath, and everyone agreed that grief would become easier if the family stopped asking how freshly cut beams had split so cleanly. Beatrix's mother did not stop asking. For 6 months, she wrote letters to officials who never answered. She visited the mill office until the owner ordered his clerks not to admit her. She walked 3 miles through freezing rain to speak with a county magistrate, only to be told that sorrow often made widows suspicious. Then the rent came due. Questions did not buy flour. Anger did not keep the stove lit. By spring, Beatrix's mother had taken work washing linens at a boarding house, and Beatrix had begun helping an undertaker named Silas Noll, her mother's estranged brother. Silas was not a gentle man, but he was careful. He had a narrow body, a severe mouth, and grey eyes that missed very little. He taught Beatrix to polish brass fittings, fold burial cloth, clean preparation tables, and speak to grieving families, without promising that pain would disappear. According to Silas, that was the first lie most undertakers told. Pain does not leave because you lower someone into the ground, he said. It simply becomes part of the weight you learn to carry. Beatrix knew something about weight. By 16, she was taller and broader than most women in Hartrow, with thick arms, wide hips, a heavy stomach, and hands strong enough to move a loaded casket without asking a man for help. People sometimes mistook her softness for weakness. They saw the fullness of her face and the breadth of her body and assumed she tired easily. Silas encouraged the mistake. "Let fools underestimate you," he told her. "It makes them careless." She spent nearly 20 years in his funeral home. She learned to recognize the grey cast of fever, the swelling caused by drowning, the bruising that appeared after a fall, and the small inconsistencies that suggested a family had not been told the whole truth. She learned carpentry because coffins cracked. She learned bookkeeping because grief made some people dishonest and others easy to exploit. She learned how to lift from her legs, how to guide a body through a narrow doorway, and how to stand still while a widow screamed at God. When her mother died, Beatrix prepared her body herself. Silas stood in the doorway and watched without interfering. After the burial, he placed the funeral home's keys in Beatrix's palm. "You can leave," he said, "or you can stay and make this place better than I did." She stayed. For a time, the business prospered. Hartrow grew. New streets were built. Families who had once buried their dead in plain pine boxes began asking for velvet interiors and silver handles. Beatrix persuaded Silas to create simple packages for laborers who could not afford extravagance. She began keeping a small room where people could sit with the dead overnight, a custom common in the countryside but fading in town. Silas complained about every change. Then he copied all of them. They might have grown old in the same building, if not for the letter that arrived one October morning. Silas read it twice, burned it in the preparation room stove, and left Hartrow before dawn the next day. He would not say who had written to him. He would not explain why he was going to Calder Vale, a mountain region hundreds of miles west. He only said, "My brother is dead, and somebody has to put his affairs in order." Beatrix had not known Silas had another brother. She remembered standing in the alley while he loaded a single case into a hired carriage. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. "As long as I am needed." That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. He looked at her then, and for the first time she saw fear beneath his severity. "Do not follow me, Bea." She was 32 years old, but his warning made her feel 11 again. Silas left Hartrow and never returned. At first, he wrote each month. His letters were short and practical. He had purchased a half share in a funeral business called Quiet Passage Funerals. The building stood in the settlement of Bellweather, near a dangerous mountain route known as Glass Pass. The work was difficult. Winters were severe. The previous owner had died without an heir. Silas intended to stay until he could sell his interest. Then the letters became less frequent. He mentioned disputes over land. He asked Beatrix strange questions about chemical burns, contaminated groundwater, and the length of time certain metals remained detectable in bone. When she wrote back demanding an explanation, he did not answer. 5 years passed. Beatrix grew angry enough to tell herself she no longer cared. Then Hartrow changed. A chain funeral company opened near the railway station, offering polished packages at prices no family business could match. Silas's absence became harder to explain to creditors. Beatrix borrowed money to keep the doors open. She sold the carriage, then the upstairs furniture, then the silver fittings Silas had insisted were essential to a respectable establishment. The winter, she turned 40, the bank took the building. She found work at another funeral home, but the owner disliked employing a woman who knew more than he did. He assigned her to laundry and cleaning. When she corrected an embalming error that would have distressed a family, he thanked her in private and dismissed her in public. For the first time since childhood, Beatrix had no place that needed her. She rented a room above a bakery. She repaired furniture for extra money and told herself she was relieved to be free of the dead. Yet every time a funeral procession passed beneath her window, she felt as if she had abandoned a language only she remembered how to speak. Then, on a grey morning in February, a solicitor arrived with news from Calder Vale. Silas Noll had died. The official record said his wagon overturned on an icy road. He had left Beatrix his half of Quiet Passage funerals. The solicitor handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Silas's angular handwriting. B. I should have told you the truth sooner. I believed distance would protect you. I was wrong. Come to Bellweather. Trust what you know. Do not trust what is written, merely because an official has signed it. The other half belongs to Lucan Sorrell. He is difficult, secretive, and frequently insufferable. He is also alive, because he understands these mountains better than anyone. I am sorry to place this burden on you. Some burdens must be carried by the person strong enough to lift them. Silas, Beatrix read the letter 3 times. Then she packed. The journey to Calder Vale took 9 days by train, coach, and finally, a narrow freight wagon that climbed into the mountains behind 2 exhausted mules. With every mile, the land rose and tightened around her. Forested ridges leaned over the road. Rivers moved beneath shelves of ice. Snow lay so deep in the higher country that fences vanished beneath it. The driver, a talkative man named Penn, pointed toward a line of pale cliffs. Glass, he said. The pass cut through the mountains like a blade wound. Sunlight reflected from frozen stone, giving the cliffs a greenish shine. The road twisted along steep drops, where a single wheel slipping could send a wagon hundreds of feet into the ravine. Why is it called that? Beatrix asked. Some say the rock glows like evening glass. Others say it is because Vesper was the name of a woman who froze there, waiting for her husband. Which story is true? Penn glanced at her. Up here, people prefer a good story to a true one. True ones tend to be worse. Bellweather appeared near sunset, a scattering of stone and timber buildings arranged around a narrow main street. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Snowbanks rose beside doorways. At the far end of town stood a small church, a stable, and a long, dark building with a modest sign, Quiet Passage Funerals, Noll and Sorrell, proprietors. The paint beneath Silas's name was newer than the rest. No one came out to greet her. Beatrix climbed from the wagon and felt the cold seize her lungs. Penn lowered her cases to the snow, accepted his payment, and departed with suspicious haste. The funeral home's door was locked. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. A bolt drew back. The door opened several inches, revealing a tall man with a lantern in one hand. He was perhaps 45, lean and weathered, with dark hair touched by grey at the temples. A scar crossed one eyebrow. His coat smelled of horse, pine smoke, and winter air. His eyes were an uncertain shade between brown and green, and they regarded Beatrix with no warmth at all. "You are late," he said. "The freight wagon broke an axle. You should have stayed in Hartrow." She looked past him into the dim hall. "You must be Lucan Sorrell, and you must be the reason Silas refused to make a sensible will." Beatrix took hold of her heaviest case. "Are you planning to let me inside?" "I have not decided." "Then decide while holding this." She pushed the case toward him. Instinct made him catch it. Its weight dragged his arm down. "What is in this?" he demanded. "My belongings." "Do you travel with anvils?" "Only when meeting men who need to be struck with one." She walked past him into the funeral home. The entry room was plain but well kept. A coal stove gave off weak heat. Wooden chairs lined one wall. Black curtains covered the windows. Silas's old coat hung from a peg beside the office door, and the sight of it stopped Beatrix more effectively than Lucan's hostility had. She touched the sleeve. It still carried the faint scent of cedar soap. "Where is he buried?" she asked. Lucan set down her case. "Behind the chapel. The ground was too hard for a full grave, so we placed him in the winter vault." "I want to see him." "You cannot." Beatrix turned. "Cannot? The vault is sealed until Thor." "I am an undertaker. You are a stranger who inherited paperwork." The words landed harder than she expected. She studied him. His face was exhausted rather than cruel. There were shadows beneath his eyes, and one knuckle was split and healing. Snow had melted along his shoulders, meaning he had returned only moments before she arrived. "Silas said you were insufferable," she said. "He said you were stubborn. He was correct about both of us." Lucan's mouth almost moved. Almost. He led her through the building. There was a viewing room, an office, a preparation room with stone walls, and a rear loading bay opening toward the stable yard. Everything was functional, clean, and cold. Quiet Passage owned 2 burial wagons, 3 horses, a small enclosed transport sled, and more debt than Beatrix liked. Her room was upstairs. It contained a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a window facing the mountains. On the pillow lay a folded blanket. Silas's blanket. Beatrix sat on the bed after Lucan left. She pressed the wool against her face and allowed herself exactly 1 minute to cry. Then she unpacked. The first body arrived before dawn. Lucan hammered on her door while the sky was still black. "Get dressed," he called. "We have a collection." Beatrix opened the door, wearing a nightgown and an expression that made him step back. Whose collection? Edwin Harrow, farmer from North Creel, found dead in his barn. Cause? Exposure, according to the message. People do not usually die of exposure inside their own barns. People do many foolish things in winter. "Give me 5 minutes. You will need 20. She closed the door in his face and was downstairs in 7. Lucan looked at her boots. They are wrong. They are leather. They are city leather. They crossed half the country without complaint. The mountains complain on behalf of footwear. He tossed her a pair of heavy overshoes. They belonged to Silas. Beatrix put them on. The drive to North Creel took 2 hours. Lucan handled the wagon with quiet precision, controlling the horses through drifts and narrow turns. Beatrix sat beside him beneath a fur-lined cover. Snow struck her cheeks like sand. "You transport everybody in the valley?" she asked. "Most of them. Why?" "Settlements are too small to maintain funeral homes. The dead come to Bellweather for preparation. Then we return them for burial. Across Vesperglass, when necessary. How many people die on that pass?" "Enough." She glanced at him. "Silas died there." "Yes. You were with him?" Lucan's hands tightened on the reins. "No." "Who found him?" I did. What happened? The wagon went over an embankment. That is what the certificate says. It is what happened. Those are not always the same thing. He looked at her then, sharp and assessing. Did Silas teach you to question every answer? He taught me that certainty is often fear wearing a respectable coat. Lucan faced the road again. You sound like him. I hope that was not meant as an insult. It was not meant as praise. Edwin Harrow's farm stood at the edge of an open slope. His widow waited in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup she had forgotten to drink from. 2 neighbors had moved the body from the barn and laid it on a door taken from its hinges. Beatrix knelt beside the dead man. Harrow was in his 60s, broad-shouldered, with grey hair and a short beard. His skin was pale. There were bruises at his throat and a dark line beneath one ear. Who found him? Beatrix asked. His widow raised a shaking hand. I did. He went out to check the mare. When he did not return, I thought he had fallen. Was the barn door open? No. Was it cold inside? Cold enough, but not like outside. Lucan remained near the doorway. Beatrix examined Harrow's hands. The nails were broken. Straw clung to dried blood on his knuckles. A man dying quietly from cold did not usually fight hard enough to damage both hands. Did he have enemies? She asked. Mrs. Harrow looked toward the neighbors. No enemies. One neighbor shifted uncomfortably. Edwin argued with the land agents, he said. What land agents? Calder Vale Development Company. They have been buying farms between here and the lower river. Mrs. Harrow's face hardened. They offered Edwin half what the land is worth. He told them he would burn the deed before he sold. Lucan interrupted. We should leave before the next storm reaches the ridge. Beatrix covered the body and helped secure it for transport. On the drive back, she said, he was strangled. Lucan did not react. You examined him for less than 10 minutes. I have examined hundreds of bodies. The certificate will be issued by Dr. Astor. The certificate has not been issued yet. It will say exposure or heart failure. You sound very sure. I know how things work here. Beatrix watched snow gather on his sleeve. Do you also know who killed him? Lucan's jaw tightened. No. Do you know why someone might? No. Then your certainty is becoming tiresome. He pulled the wagon to a stop so abruptly that the horses tossed their heads. This is not Hartrow, he said. You cannot walk into a mountain settlement, accuse people of murder, and expect the law to protect you. I have never expected the law to protect me. Then show some sense. Sense tells me Edwin Harrow fought for his life. Sense should also tell you that Silas asked questions and ended in a ravine. For several seconds, the only sound was the wind against the wagon. Beatrix leaned closer. Was that a warning? It was a fact. Those can be the same thing. Lucan drove on. Dr. Mirelle Astor arrived at Quiet Passage that afternoon. She was a slender woman in her late 30s, dressed in a dark wool coat. Her black hair was pinned neatly at the back of her head, though loose strands clung to her damp temples. She carried a medical case and moved with the controlled haste of someone expected in too many places at once. You are Beatrix Noll, she said. I am. Mirelle Astor. They shook hands. Mirelle's fingers were cold. I am sorry about Silas, the doctor said. He was difficult, but he cared deeply about this valley. So everyone keeps telling me. It is possible for both parts to be true. Mirelle removed her gloves and examined Edwin Harrow. Beatrix watched without speaking. The doctor's hands paused at the bruising on his throat. You see it, Beatrix said. Mirelle continued her examination. I see discoloration. From pressure. Possibly from a fall against farm equipment. On both sides of the throat. The doctor's face remained composed. The barn was cold. He had a history of heart trouble. His widow did not mention it. Medical histories are not always discussed with undertakers. Nor are murders, apparently. Mirelle snapped her case closed. I will list cardiac failure complicated by exposure. Beatrix stepped between her and the door. "You know that is false." Morell looked up. She was several inches shorter, but her gaze was steady. "Move. Tell me why." "Because I have other patients." "You have a dead man with hand injuries and bruising consistent with strangulation, and you have no authority to prevent me from completing my duties." Lucan entered from the hall. "That is enough." Beatrix turned on him. "You asked me to prepare the dead. I will not help disguise murder." "No one asked you to disguise anything," Morell said. "Then write what you saw." Something passed across Morell's face. Fear, Beatrix thought, not anger. The doctor lowered her voice. "You arrived yesterday. You do not understand the consequences of making accusations here. I understand a widow is about to be told her husband died because he was careless." Morell reached for the door. Beatrix did not stop her. Before leaving, the doctor said, "Silas thought truth was a lantern. He believed that if he held it high enough, everyone would see what he saw. He never understood that light also tells dangerous people where you are standing." She walked out into the snow. Lucan watched from the window until she disappeared. "You should leave Bellweather," he said. "Are you planning to repeat that every morning?" "Until you listen." "I spent half my life around Silas. Repetition does not improve an argument." She returned to Harrow's body. His coat was heavy brown wool, torn near one pocket. Beatrix checked the seams for hidden damage before cleaning it for the family. Her fingers found a section of stitching along the inner lining that was newer than the rest. She took a small knife and carefully cut the thread. A narrow strip of cloth had been sewn inside. 7 words were written across it in faded ink. "The Wells are not sick, they are being poisoned." Beatrix read the message twice. Lucan moved closer. "What is it?" She folded the cloth before he could see. "Nothing." He stared at her. "You are a poor liar. I am out of practice. What did you find?" "A reason not to leave." For the first time, Lucan looked frightened. He reached for the cloth. Beatrix closed her fist around it. "Give it to me." "No. You have no idea what you are holding. That makes 2 of us." His voice dropped. "Silas found messages like that." The room became very still. "How many?" "I do not know." "What did they say?" "Warnings, names, dates." "Who placed them?" "I do not know." "Where are they now?" Lucan turned away. "That question is why you should leave." Beatrix stepped into his path. "You knew Edwin Harrow's death would be falsified. You knew Silas investigated similar messages. You altered your expression when I mentioned the land company. Either you are part of this, or you are terrified of someone who is." Lucan's eyes hardened. "Fear is not proof of guilt." "No, but secrecy is often its cousin. You think experience with corpses makes you an investigator." "No, experience with people makes me suspicious of men who answer simple questions like riddles." He leaned closer. "You want a simple answer? Here it is. Calder Vale belongs to those with enough money to purchase obedience and enough cruelty to punish refusal. Silas forgot that. I will not. You are still here. I know when to bend." Beatrix looked at the split knuckle on his hand. "Do you?" That evening, Nerian Quill came to register the death. He was Bellweather's clerk, postmaster, and records officer, a round-shouldered man in his 50s, with silver spectacles and ink stains on every finger. He spoke softly and apologized whenever he opened a door, as if afraid of disturbing the building. "Miss Noll," he said, bowing slightly. "Your uncle spoke of you often." "Only good things, I assume." Nerian adjusted his spectacles. "Mostly accurate things." She liked him immediately, which made her wary. He reviewed Morell's certificate and entered Edwin Harrow's name into a thick ledger. Beatrix stood beside the desk. "How many people have died of exposure this winter?" she asked. 7. "How many owned land?" His pen stopped. "Most people here own some land." "How many refused offers from Calder Vale Development?" Nerian removed his spectacles and cleaned them, though the lenses were already clear. I cannot discuss private transactions. Are death records private? No. Then I would like to see the last 2 years. Lucan appeared in the office doorway. No. Beatrix did not look at him. I am half owner of this establishment. And I am the other half. Which means neither of us can issue orders alone. It means I can prevent you from using business records for personal investigations. Nerian carefully replaced his spectacles. I should return to the registry. Beatrix turned toward him. Did you know my uncle was murdered? Nerian went pale. Lucan seized Beatrix's arm and pulled her away from the desk. Enough. She freed herself with one sharp movement. Do not grab me. I am trying to keep you alive. Then begin by telling me what killed Silas. Nerian backed toward the door. His coat caught on a chair. A folded paper slipped from the pocket and fell to the floor. Beatrix picked it up. It was a list of names. Edwin Harrow appeared at the bottom. Above him were 6 others, each followed by a parcel number and a date. Lucan took the page from her. Nerian's face collapsed with defeat. You were not supposed to see that, he whispered. Clearly. Lucan scanned the list. These are all landowners along the northern watershed. Beatrix looked at him. So now you remember how to answer questions. Nerian closed the office door. The company began making offers 18 months ago, he said. At first, they wanted land near old quarry sites. Then they expanded west toward the wells. Those who sold moved away. Those who refused began suffering misfortunes. Accidents? Beatrix asked. Falls, fires, illness, poisoning? Nerian's eyes flicked toward Lucan. I do not know. That message says someone does. Nerian sank into a chair. Silas believed a mineral seam runs beneath the watershed, something more valuable than iron. Calder Vale Development bought survey rights through a subsidiary, but local deeds prevent deep excavation without unanimous consent from landowners. So Octavia Pell is driving people away, Beatrix said. Nerian flinched at the name. You should not speak of her casually. Why? Does she appear when summoned? No, Lucan said. Her men do. Beatrix folded her arms. Who is Octavia Pell? Nerian answered. She owns the development company, the lumber contracts, 2 freight depots, and much of the lower railway. She funds the county sheriff's office and most political campaigns within 100 miles. Silas suspected her. Silas suspected everyone. An admirable habit. He became convinced the wells were being contaminated deliberately, Nerian continued. Several communities reported stomach sickness, weakness, miscarriages, and livestock deaths. The company blamed naturally occurring minerals. Dr. Astor's reports supported that conclusion. Under coercion, Nerian looked toward the floor. I do not know. Lucan tossed the list onto the desk. This conversation ends now. Beatrix faced him. No. Edwin Harrow's family needs a funeral. That is our work. Our work is also to preserve evidence. Our work is to bury the dead. Not their secrets. Lucan's expression went cold. Silas used to say that. Then he died. The following days brought 3 more bodies. A shepherd named Amos Cale was said to have slipped into a creek. His lungs contained little water, but the back of his skull was bruised. A widow named Ruth Dane supposedly died from winter fever. Beatrix found discoloration around her mouth and a chemical smell in a bottle of tonic beside her bed. The third was a young surveyor named Julian Venn, officially killed when his horse threw him. Both of his boots were clean, and the rope burns around his wrists were unmistakable. Each had refused to sell land or had worked near the watershed. Each wore clothing with a recently repaired seam. Inside each seam, Beatrix found a message. Parcel 17. Samples beneath the eastern marker. Mirel knows the first deaths were not natural. The blue barrels arrive after midnight. She kept the strips hidden in a tin beneath a loose floorboard in her room. Lucan knew she had found them. He stopped asking. Instead, he watched her. He watched when she entered the preparation room. He watched when Nerian visited. He watched when wagons belonging to Calder Vale Development passed along Bellweather's main street. At night, he disappeared. Beatrix first noticed because the stable door creaked beneath her window. She looked out and saw Lucan harnessing the enclosed transport sled. He loaded a plain coffin into the back, covered it with canvas, and drove toward the western road. The next morning, the transport ledger listed no journey. She said nothing. For 3 nights, she pretended to sleep. On the 4th, she waited in the stable. Lucan entered shortly after midnight carrying a lantern and nearly dropped it when Beatrix stepped from behind a stall. "You move quietly for someone who complains about her knees," he said. "My knees are sensible, they complain only when necessary." He set down the lantern. "Go back inside. What is in the coffin?" "A body." "Whose?" "None of your concern. It is my funeral home." "Half." "Half the coffin, then?" Lucan rubbed a hand over his face. "You truly are Silas's niece. You keep saying that as if it explains why you lie." "I am not lying. You altered the ledger." "I omitted a journey." "That is a lie written sideways." A horse shifted behind them. Lucan lowered his voice. "There are things you do not need to know. People say that when knowledge threatens them." "Knowledge threatens you? Then I would rather see the blade." He studied her for a long moment. Finally, he lifted the canvas. The coffin had been used recently. Mud stained its lower edge. Lucan opened the lid. Inside were glass jars, sealed metal boxes, bundles of documents wrapped in oilcloth, and several small bags of soil. Beatrix touched one jar. Cloudy water moved inside. "Evidence," she said. "Yes. From the wells?" "And from bodies Silas examined. You have been smuggling it out. To a chemist in Latham County. Someone independent of Pell's influence. Why at night? Because her agents inspect freight shipments. Why use coffins? Because most men are afraid to search them." Beatrix looked at him. "Most men. You would open one during supper. If the soup was poor." He gave a quiet breath that might have been laughter. Then it vanished. "Silas and I collected samples for months," he said. "We sent the first set through ordinary post. The package disappeared. The courier was found in a ravine. After that, we used transport coffins." "What did the tests show?" "Arsenic and other heavy metals at levels too high to be natural." "Where are the reports?" "Missing." "Convenient." Lucan's gaze sharpened. "You think I killed him?" "I think you have concealed nearly everything since I arrived. I concealed it because Silas made me promise. Silas is dead. That does not release me. It released him." The words hurt them both. Lucan looked away. "He went to Vesperglass alone," he said. "He received word that a company wagon had entered the upper watershed. I was transporting a child's body to Meader's Hollow. By the time I returned, he was gone." "You found the wreck?" "Yes." "Was he in it?" Lucan was silent too long. "Was he in it?" Beatrix repeated. "No." Cold moved through her more sharply than the winter air. "Then whose body did I inherit?" "There was no body, but he is in the chapel vault. The coffin is sealed. What is inside it?" "Stones." Beatrix struck him. Her palm cracked against his cheek. The horses startled. Lucan did not move. "You let me grieve over stones. I wanted to tell you. You had 10 days. I needed to know why you came. He was my family. He told me you had not spoken in years. That does not make him less dead." "No." The anger left her so suddenly that she had to grip the coffin edge. "What happened to him?" "I found blood beside the road. Signs of a struggle. The wagon had been pushed over after the horses were cut loose. There were boot prints leading toward a company transport route. Why declare him dead without a body?" Nerian delayed the registration for weeks. Then Pell's people began asking questions. We believed a legal death would make them stop searching. Did it? For a while. Beatrix looked at the samples in the coffin. You believe he might be alive? Lucan's face answered before he spoke. I believed it at first. And now I think they took him, learned what he knew, and buried him where no one will find him. She pressed both hands against the coffin until the shaking stopped. You should have told me. Yes. Why did he leave me the business? He said that if anything happened to him, Quiet Passage would need someone who could read the dead. Beatrix looked up. Those were his words. Yes. She closed the coffin lid. Then we finish what he began. No, do not be tiresome. Pell has already killed landowners, laborers, and possibly your uncle. She controls the sheriff. She controls the roads. She has men in every settlement. And we have evidence. We have samples that can disappear. We have bodies, which will be buried, not until they are properly examined. Mirelle will not help. Then we persuade her. How? Beatrix took the lantern. By discovering what she is afraid of losing. Dr. Astor lived in 2 rooms behind Bellweather's clinic. The front room smelled of alcohol, coal smoke, and boiled linen. Shelves held medicine bottles and bandages. A child coughed behind a curtain, while his mother murmured to him. Beatrix waited until the patients had gone. Mirelle locked the door. You should not be here. I have heard that often since arriving. It has not improved with repetition. I signed the certificates. You have no reason to speak with me. That is precisely why I have reason. Mirelle began cleaning instruments. Beatrix placed the 4 cloth messages on the table. The doctor froze. Where did you get those? From the dead. You should burn them. Silas found others. I know. You wrote one of them. Mirelle's head lifted. Beatrix pointed to the message mentioning the first deaths. The letters lean left. The capital M is formed in 2 strokes. It matches the labels on your medicine bottles. The doctor stared at the cloth. You are observant. It is a burden. You cannot prove I wrote it. I do not need to. I need you to tell me why. Mirelle sat slowly. Behind her composure, exhaustion showed in every line of her face. The first cases were in Larkspur Basin, she said. Families developed severe stomach pain. Children became weak. 2 women lost pregnancies. Livestock refused the water. And you tested the wells. I sent samples to the county laboratory. The results showed contamination. Before I could warn anyone, Octavia Pell came to see me. What did she want? To know whether I had kept copies. Had you? Yes. Where are they? Gone. Mirelle's fingers twisted together. She knew about my brother. He had falsified invoices at a railway warehouse years earlier. It was stupid, but the amount was large enough for prison. Pell had purchased the company that employed him. She offered to keep the records buried if I revised my report. You chose your brother over entire communities. Mirelle flinched. At first, she said the contamination was accidental. She promised the wells would be closed and repaired. I believed her, because I needed to believe her. And after people began dying, I tried to withdraw the report. My brother was arrested within a day. Pell arranged his release, then sent me a copy of his prison transfer order, a northern labor camp, 10 years. Beatrix's anger remained, but it changed shape. So you continued signing false certificates? Yes. Even for murder. Mirelle's eyes filled, though no tears fell. I told myself certificates were paper, that the deaths had already happened, that I could do more good by remaining here as a doctor than by sacrificing myself and my brother. Did that comfort the families? No. Does it comfort you? No. The child's cough seemed to remain in the room even though he had gone. Silas approached you, Beatrix said. He knew I was lying. He did not threaten me. That made it worse. What did he ask? For a list of suspicious deaths and tissue samples where possible. He said he could hide them in coffins Lucan transported. Did you help? Sometimes. Why not always? Because courage is not a door one walks through once. Some days I could do it. Other days I was afraid. Beatrix sat across from her. Pell's poison will spread when the snow melts. Mirelle nodded. The upper watershed feeds 3 valleys. Spring runoff could carry contamination into the Calder River. How long? 6 weeks, perhaps less if the thaw comes early. Then help us expose her. To whom? The sheriff attends dinner at her house. Federal land inspectors, railway authorities, newspapers outside the valley. You think they will believe an undertaker, a compromised doctor, and a wagon driver? They will believe evidence. If it reaches them, Lucan has been moving it. Mirelle looked toward the window. So he trusted you. No, he grew tired of being struck. To Beatrix's surprise, Mirelle laughed. It was brief and broken, but real. Then the doctor opened a locked cabinet and removed a ledger. These are the true causes of death, she said. Not all are proven. Some are only my best judgment. Beatrix opened it. There were 31 names. At the bottom of the final page was Silas Noll. Beside his name, Mirelle had written, "Presumed homicide, body not recovered." Beatrix closed the book. "We will need copies." "I can make them tonight." "Make 3. Why 3? Because a single truth is easy to burn." The next morning, Octavia Pell came to Quiet Passage. She arrived in a black carriage pulled by matched grey horses. 2 armed men sat beside the driver. Another followed on horseback. Octavia stepped down without assistance. She was in her early 50s, elegantly dressed in a fitted winter coat with a fur collar. Her silver blonde hair was arranged beneath a dark hat. She had the calm posture of someone accustomed to entering rooms, already convinced they belonged to her. Beatrix met her in the viewing parlor. "Miss Noll," Octavia said, "please accept my sympathy. Your uncle's death was a loss to Bellweather." "Was it?" Octavia smiled. "Silas and I disagreed, but disagreement need not erase respect. What did you respect about him? His endurance. Not his questions. Questions are useful when asked by people willing to accept answers." Lucan stood near the back wall. His body appeared relaxed, but Beatrix saw his attention shift toward the armed men outside. Octavia removed her gloves. "I understand you have inherited half this business. So the will claims. I would like to purchase your interest. I arrived less than 2 weeks ago, which means you still remember life beyond these mountains. I also remember what failing businesses are worth." Octavia named a sum large enough to buy back the Hartrow funeral home twice over. Beatrix kept her face still. "That is generous." "It is practical." "For whom?" "For everyone. Quiet Passage occupies land needed for a freight expansion. Mr. Sorrell has refused several reasonable proposals." Lucan said, "They were not reasonable." Octavia did not look at him. "You could return east with financial security. There is no shame in recognizing that mountain work is not suited to every constitution." Beatrix understood the insult. It had been delivered so smoothly that challenging it would allow Octavia to pretend surprise. She smiled. "My constitution has carried more dead men than your carriage." One of the guards coughed to hide a laugh. Octavia's gaze cooled. "You may find that strength is less useful here than cooperation." "I have found cooperation in short supply. Perhaps you have approached the wrong people. Perhaps the right people keep dying." The room tightened. Lucan stepped forward. "Beatrix." "No," Octavia said softly. "Let her speak." Beatrix held the woman's gaze. Edwin Harrow, Ruth Dane, Amos Cale, Julian Venn, all refused your company's offers. All died under questionable circumstances. Winter is dangerous. So are men paid to make it more so. Octavia put on her gloves. Your uncle also confused suspicion with proof. And where is he now? Something changed in Octavia's expression. Not guilt, satisfaction. Buried, I am told. You were told incorrectly. Lucan swore under his breath. Octavia's eyes moved to him. Still moving cargo at night, Lucan. The use of his first name carried old familiarity. Beatrix noticed. Lucan's face became unreadable. Octavia continued, "Your loyalty to Silas was touching. Misplaced, but touching." "What do you know about loyalty?" he asked. "Enough to know that it has always been your weakness." She turned toward Beatrix. "My offer remains open for 3 days. After that, circumstances may reduce the property's value." The armed men followed her out. When the carriage had gone, Beatrix faced Lucan. "How well do you know her?" "Well enough. That is not an answer. I worked for Calder Vale Development." She waited. He exhaled. "For 6 years. I drove survey teams, freight wagons, and payroll shipments. Octavia hired me when no one else would." "Why would no one else hire you?" "My father owed money. When he died, the debt became mine. I stole a horse to escape the lender's men." "Did you?" "Yes." Beatrix considered this. "Was it a good horse?" Lucan blinked. "It was fast. Then you showed judgment." Despite himself, he smiled. "I was caught before sunrise. What did Octavia want from you?" "A driver who knew the illegal mining trails. She paid the debt and kept the theft charge from court. In exchange for loyalty. In exchange for obedience." "What changed?" "A wagon overturned near Larkspur Basin. Barrels broke open. The liquid burned the driver's hands and killed 2 mules. Octavia ordered us to bury the barrels beside an abandoned well. The first contamination. Perhaps. I left soon after." "Why did she allow that?" "She did not. Silas helped me disappear for several months. When I returned, I bought half of Quiet Passage through an intermediary. By then, Octavia had decided I was more useful watched than hunted. And now she knows we have evidence." Beatrix looked toward the window. "Then we move it today." They prepared 2 coffins. The first held samples, Mirel's copied ledger pages, lists of property purchases, and written statements from families. The second held nothing but stones and scrap metal. Lucan planned to take the real evidence west toward Latham County, while a hired driver carried the decoy south. Nerian would send coded telegrams to 3 newspapers and a federal water office, advising them that documentation was coming. At dusk, Nerian arrived breathless. "The telegraph line is down," he said. "Storm damage?" Beatrix asked. "Cut wire, north of the station." Lucan swore. "Roads?" "Company men have established inspection points near Calder Bridge." "They are closing the valley," Beatrix said. Nerian nodded. "There is more. Tessa Marrow came into the registry. Her father's settlement received another purchase offer. She says company workers have been placing blue barrels near the upper springs." Tessa Marrow was 23, a schoolteacher from Pinecross and the daughter of one of the valley's largest landowners. She arrived at Quiet Passage carrying maps beneath her coat. "My students have been ill for months," she said. "Not all at once. Headaches, stomach pain, weakness. The company physician said it was winter fever." Mirel, who had come through the rear entrance, lowered her eyes. Tessa noticed. "You knew." "I suspected," Mirel said. "You signed notes saying the school was safe. I was wrong. You were afraid." "Yes." Tessa's anger shook her voice. "Children drank from that well. I know." "Apologies will not make them healthy." "No," Mirel said, "but evidence may stop more harm." Tessa unfolded the maps. "These show old drainage channels from the quarry. My father kept copies from before the company purchased the survey office. If barrels are emptied near the upper springs, runoff enters every channel marked in blue." Beatrix studied the lines. One route led directly toward Bellweather's main well. "How soon would the spring melt carry it?" she asked. Tessa pointed toward the southern slope. "Snowpack is unstable. If warm rain comes, days. Lucan leaned over the map. There is an abandoned railway spur through Morrow Cut. It bypasses Calder Bridge. Can a wagon pass? Beatrix asked. Barely, not after heavy snow. Then we use it now. Nerian shook his head. The evidence is not enough. Pell will claim the samples were altered. Then we need to catch them placing the poison, Tessa said. Lucan looked at her. No. My family owns the nearest land. I know the springs. Which means Pell's men know you. They do not expect me to travel with an undertaker. Beatrix considered the plan. We take the burial wagon. Lucan frowned. For what burial? Elias Gant died yesterday in Pinecross. His family requested transport in the morning. You propose carrying evidence while conducting a funeral. I propose using the one procession company men cannot stop without witnesses. They may stop it anyway. Then they do so in front of an entire settlement, Mirelle said. We could hide the documents beneath the false floor. Lucan stared at them all. This is reckless. Beatrix folded the map. Yes. Silas would approve. That is the most troubling argument you have made. They left Bellweather before dawn. The burial wagon carried Elias Gant's coffin, the evidence hidden beneath a removable floor panel, and enough food and blankets for 2 days. Lucan drove. Beatrix sat beside him. Tessa and Mirelle traveled in a covered wagon behind them, with members of the Gant family. Nerian remained in Bellweather to repair the telegraph line and send copies of the records if possible. Snow fell steadily. At Pinecross, they held the funeral in a small church, crowded with farmers, miners, and children wrapped in patched coats. Elias Gant had been a carpenter. His coffin was simple pine, built by his sons. Beatrix stood near the family while the pastor spoke. She watched faces. Nearly everyone looked tired. Several children had pale skin and dark circles beneath their eyes. A woman near the rear coughed into a handkerchief. An old man leaned against the wall because he lacked strength to stand alone. These were not numbers in Mirelle's ledger. They were people who had trusted signed notices saying their water was safe. After the burial, Tessa quietly gathered 4 landowners in the church vestry. Mirelle showed them copies of the true medical records. One man slammed his fist against the table. We go to Pell's office now. And do what? Beatrix asked. Drag her into the street. Then her guards shoot you, the sheriff arrests whoever survives, and the evidence disappears. So we wait while our families drink poison. No, you help us document the barrels and escort the evidence beyond the valley. The landowners agreed to send riders to neighboring settlements. By noon, a procession of 12 wagons had formed behind the burial carriage. Officially, they were returning from Elias Gant's funeral. Unofficially, they were witnesses. Tessa led them toward a narrow trail above the upper springs. The wagons stopped below the ridge. Lucan, Beatrix, Tessa, and 2 farmers continued on foot. Beatrix's borrowed overshoes sank deep into the snow. Each step demanded effort. Her breath steamed. Lucan stayed close without offering unnecessary help, which she appreciated more than assistance. You can say it, she told him. Say what? That I am slowing you down. You are not. You are a poor liar. I am improving. They reached the ridge near sunset. Below them, in a clearing surrounded by fir trees, stood 3 company wagons. Men rolled blue barrels toward a stone-lined spring. Another man used a crowbar to break the ice. Tessa drew a small camera from her pack. My school purchased this for class portraits. Lucan looked at the fading light. Can it capture them? If they remain still long enough. They will not. Beatrix studied the clearing. We make them remain still. Before Lucan could stop her, she stood and walked down the slope. The men saw her halfway. One reached for a rifle. Beatrix raised both hands. I appear to be lost. There were 5 men. The oldest wore a company foreman's badge. This land is restricted, he called. That explains the lack of signposts. Turn around. I would, but I have a question. The foreman stared. What question? What is in the barrels? The men exchanged looks. Mining cleanser. Does it improve the flavor of well water? The rifleman stepped forward. You need to leave. Beatrix continued walking until she stood near the first wagon. The broken barrel seals were marked with a chemical supplier's name and a warning symbol. Behind her, hidden on the ridge, Tessa prepared the camera. I am an undertaker, Beatrix said. I have buried several people who drank from these springs. I would like to know whether I should send their families a bill on your behalf. The foreman's face hardened. Who are you? Beatrix Noll. Recognition moved through the group. Pell said she might cause trouble, one man muttered. The foreman signaled. Two men approached her. Beatrix backed toward the barrels, forcing them into position beneath the open sky. Hold still, she said. What? The camera flashed from the ridge. The men turned. Lucan shouted, Now! Tessa and the farmers ran. The rifleman raised his weapon, but Lucan struck his arm aside. The shot tore into a tree. One farmer tackled the foreman. Another seized the camera plate and fled uphill with Tessa. Beatrix found herself facing a man nearly as broad as she was. He grabbed her coat. She drove her knee into his thigh, twisted his wrist, and used his momentum to throw him against a barrel. The lid shifted. Clear liquid splashed across the snow, releasing a bitter metallic smell. Do not touch it, Mirelle had warned. Beatrix pulled the man away before his bare hand entered the spill. He stared at her in disbelief. You saved me. I am not letting you become another false certificate. Lucan fought the rifleman near the wagon. The foreman broke free and blew a whistle. From beyond the trees came answering shouts. More men, Lucan called. Move! They climbed toward the ridge. Beatrix's lungs burned. Her legs felt heavy, but she kept moving. Lucan remained below her, placing himself between the group and the armed men. At the top, Tessa waved them toward the wagons. They had nearly reached the procession when the mountain made a sound like distant thunder. Lucan stopped. That is not thunder. A second crack rolled across the slope. Snow shifted on the ridge above the road. Run! He shouted. The avalanche struck before the drivers could turn their teams. A wall of snow, ice, and broken timber crashed across the trail. Horses screamed. Wagons overturned. Beatrix was lifted from her feet and thrown against the burial carriage. The world became white pressure and noise. Then silence. She could not breathe. Snow covered her face. One arm was pinned beneath her. Panic rose fast and useless. She forced herself to slow her breathing and moved her free hand across the hard-packed snow until she found air. A muffled voice shouted nearby. Beatrix pushed upward. The snow shifted. A hand broke through above her and seized her wrist. Lucan dragged her into the open. Blood ran from a cut near his hairline. Are you hurt? Only insulted. Can you stand? She stood. The road had vanished. 3 wagons lay on their sides. One horse was trapped beneath a broken shaft. People cried out from snowbanks and wreckage. The burial wagon remained partly upright, wedged against a fallen tree. Tessa was missing. Beatrix heard a faint call beneath the overturned family wagon. She is here! Lucan and 2 farmers pulled at the wagon, but it would not move. Beatrix crawled beneath the broken side. Tessa lay pinned by a bench, her left leg twisted. Mirelle! Beatrix shouted. The doctor crawled in beside her. The bone may be broken, Mirelle said. We must lift the bench without moving her spine. There was little room. Beatrix braced her back against the wagon floor, planted both feet, and gripped the bench. Pull her when I lift. You cannot hold that alone, Lucan said from outside. Then do not waste time explaining it. She pushed. The bench rose several inches. Pain shot through her shoulders. Her arms trembled, but years of lifting coffins had taught her how to carry weight without fighting it. She adjusted, breathed, and held. Mirel and Lucan pulled Tessa free. The moment they cleared her, Beatrix released the bench. It crashed down. She crawled out on shaking hands. Lucan caught her by the waist before she fell. For one breath, they remained close, his face inches from hers. "You are hurt," he said. "So are 20 other people." His hands stayed at her sides. "Beatrix, I am standing. That was not my question. You did not ask one." A shout came from below the road. The company men were climbing toward the wreckage. Lucan released her. "They triggered the slide," he said. "The first crack was blasting powder." The survivors had little time. The road ahead was buried. The route behind led toward armed men. Wind increased, driving snow through the broken trees. Beatrix looked at the burial wagon. "Get everyone inside or behind it." "It will not hold them all," a farmer said. "It does not need to. We use the coffin panels, doors, and wagon covers to build a shelter against the wind." The coffin had already been removed for burial. Its compartment was empty, except for hidden evidence beneath the floor. Lucan understood. "If they search it, they will search bodies first. We keep people alive." They worked quickly. Broken wagon sides became walls. Canvas covers formed a low roof. The burial carriage blocked the wind. Beatrix organized the injured by severity, while Mirel treated them. Tessa could not walk. "We need to reach the old railway tunnel," Lucan said. "It is half a mile north. Stone shelter, 2 entrances. Can the injured make it?" "Not all." Beatrix looked toward the slope. Dark figures moved through the trees. "Then we divide. You lead those who can walk. I stay with Mirel and the injured." "No. You know the route. And you know the evidence is beneath this wagon." "Exactly. They expect us to protect it. Let them believe we are trapped here while you carry copies out." Lucan stared at her. "I am not leaving you." The words came with more force than either expected. Beatrix's voice softened. "You are not leaving me. You are leading them to safety. I can lead everyone after dark. Tessa will not survive hours in this cold." Mirel looked up from bandaging Tessa's leg. "She is right." Lucan's face tightened. Beatrix placed a hand on his arm. "Trust me to carry my part." He covered her hand with his. Then he nodded. They made a litter for Tessa from 2 poles and a wagon cover. Beatrix took the front. A farmer took the rear. Lucan objected. "She is too heavy for you in deep snow." Beatrix adjusted the strap across her shoulders. "So were most of the men I buried." The group moved north. Snow reached Beatrix's thighs in places. The litter dragged. Each step became a deliberate act. She focused on the next patch of ground, then the next. Tessa bit down on a strip of leather to keep from crying out. Lucan ranged ahead, marking safe footing and returning to help others through drifts. At a narrow ravine, he tied ropes between trees and guided the survivors across. The company men followed. A rifle shot echoed behind them. "Faster," Lucan said. They reached the railway tunnel as darkness settled. The entrance was partly blocked by snow, but the interior was dry. Old timber supports lined the stone walls. Rusted track disappeared into blackness. Lucan counted the survivors. 3 missing. "They may be at the wagons," Beatrix said. "Or taken." He looked back toward the entrance. "You stay here." "No." He gave her a look. "Your arms are shaking. So is the mountain." "Beatrix. Tessa needs Mirel. The others need fire. You need someone who can recognize which compartment holds the evidence." His expression shifted. "You moved it." "Of course." "Where?" "Inside Elias Gant's coffin before the burial." Lucan stared. "You buried the evidence." "Copies. Nerian has another set. Mirel has the original ledger. The chemical samples are beneath the wagon floor. You allowed them to be trapped at the wreck. Glass breaks. Paper survives in dry ground." A slow smile appeared despite the danger. "You planned for the evidence to be discovered after burial. Undertakers are patient." The smile vanished as footsteps sounded outside. Lucan extinguished the lantern. Men entered the tunnel. "Miss Noll," called the foreman's voice. "Mrs. Pell wishes to speak with you." Beatrix remained behind a timber support. She should have accepted my invitation to the funeral. "You injured one of my men. I prevented him from bathing in poison. You stole company property. Water is not company property. It is on company land, not according to the deeds." The foreman moved deeper into the tunnel with 2 armed men. Lucan whispered, "There is a maintenance shaft 20 yards behind us. Take the others." "What will you do?" "Delay them." "With what?" He held up a railroad flare from an emergency box. Beatrix understood. The tunnel roof contained old snow vents. A bright flare and smoke might convince the men that blasting powder had been placed nearby. "That is a terrible plan," she said. "You are a bad influence." She touched his face, briefly and without planning to. "Do not die to impress me." His hand closed around her wrist. I would not know how. She led the survivors toward the maintenance shaft. Behind them, Lucan struck the flare. Red light flooded the tunnel. The company men shouted. Lucan yelled, "Another step, and the whole entrance comes down." The foreman stopped. "You are bluffing." "Test the theory." Smoke curled toward the ceiling. Beatrix moved Tessa through the shaft. It opened onto the far side of the ridge, where an old service path descended toward Morrow Cut. Lucan emerged moments later. "They believed you?" Beatrix asked. "No. The roof beam collapsed." "Did you cause it?" "Not intentionally." The company men did not follow. By midnight, the survivors reached an abandoned station house beside the old railway spur. One wall had partly fallen, but the stove worked. Mirelle set Tessa's leg. The farmers shared food and blankets. Lucan stood watch near the window. Beatrix joined him. His knuckles were bleeding again. "You should let Mirelle see that. She has worse injuries to treat. That does not make yours imaginary." She cleaned the cuts with water and wrapped his hand. "You are very commanding," he said. "I have been told." "Frequently?" "Mostly by men who later admitted I was right." He watched her tie the bandage. "Why did you come?" "For Silas." "That is not the whole answer." She sat beside him. "In Hartrow, I lost the funeral home. I spent years believing that if I worked hard enough, cared enough, and made myself useful enough, I would earn a permanent place in the world. Then the bank took the building, my employer dismissed me, and I realized usefulness does not guarantee belonging." Lucan listened without interruption. "When Silas left me quiet passage, I thought he had given me another failing business. I was angry. Then I found the messages. Suddenly, the dead needed something from me again. You say that as if need and love are the same. They are not." "No." She looked at him. "Why did you stay after Silas died?" "Because I promised. That is duty." "Yes." "Not the whole answer." He leaned his head against the wall. "Silas knew what I had done for Octavia. He knew I helped transport the first barrels. I did not understand their purpose, but that did not matter to me at the time. I was paid not to ask. You eventually asked, after people became sick. And you helped him gather proof. Too late for some. It is always too late for someone. That does not excuse us. No. But guilt is useful only when it changes what we do next." He looked at her. "Did Silas teach you that?" "No. He was terrible at forgiveness. So are you. I am trying to improve." Outside, wind pushed snow against the window. Lucan reached for her hand. Their fingers were both rough, marked by work of different kinds. "I was wrong about you," he said. "Be specific. I would like to enjoy it fully. I thought the mountains would break you. They may yet." "No." He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles. "They will have to go through you first." At dawn, riders arrived from Pinecross. They brought news that the avalanche had blocked the main road completely. Caldervale development men had returned to Bellweather and taken Nerian into custody. On whose authority? Beatrix asked. The sheriff's, one rider said. They claim he falsified land records. Lucan grabbed his coat. We go back. Mirelle stepped in front of him. The direct road is blocked. The old spur leads within 5 miles of town. Tessa cannot travel. Tessa, pale with pain, pushed herself upright. You are not staying because of me. Beatrix looked around the station house. The gathered farmers were no longer frightened individuals. They had seen the barrels. They had seen company men pursue a funeral procession and trigger an avalanche. We do not return secretly, Beatrix said. We return with everyone. By mid-morning, riders had spread through the surrounding settlements. Families came on horseback, in sleds, and on foot. Some carried old deeds. Others brought jars of discolored water, dead livestock reports, and letters from Caldervale Development threatening foreclosure or legal action. By noon, nearly 80 people stood outside the station. Beatrix addressed them from the loading platform. Octavia Pell has power because she keeps every family isolated, she said. She tells one farmer that his well failed naturally. She tells one widow that her husband died by accident. She tells one doctor that no one will believe her. She tells one clerk that records are only paper. Each person is made to believe they are alone. She held up one of the cloth messages. The dead knew better. They carried warnings to one another. They preserved names, dates, and proof. Now we must do the same for the living. An older woman called. The sheriff will arrest us. He cannot arrest an entire valley without drawing attention. He may try. Then we make certain the rest of the country sees him do it. Tessa raised her camera. We have photographs. Mirelle held up her ledger. We have medical records. A farmer displayed the chemical seal taken from the barrel. We have this. Lucan stood beside Beatrix. And I know where Octavia keeps the original survey reports. Beatrix turned. You neglected to mention that. I was saving it for an inspiring moment. Where? Her freight office in Bellweather. Silas saw the files once. They contain maps showing the mineral seam and company orders for chemical waste. Can we enter the building? Not quietly. Beatrix looked at the crowd. We are finished being quiet. They reached Bellweather near sunset. The main street filled with wagons, horses, and people carrying lanterns. Shopkeepers came outside. Church bells rang, first as a warning, then as a summons. The sheriff waited in front of the registry office with 6 deputies and a dozen company guards. Sheriff Colm Vey was a heavy-jawed man with a red face and a fur-lined coat. He raised one hand. This gathering is unlawful. Beatrix walked to the front. Under which law? Obstruction, public disturbance, and interference with a lawful investigation. Is Nerian Quill under arrest? He is being questioned. For how long? That is not your concern. He is our clerk, someone shouted. Others joined. The sheriff's hand moved toward his pistol. Lucan stepped beside Beatrix. Careful, Colm. There are children watching. The sheriff sneered. You should have left when Pell gave you the chance. Beatrix heard the admission move through the crowd like wind through grass. Thank you, she said. The sheriff frowned. For what? For saying her name before all these witnesses. The doors of the development office opened. Octavia Pell emerged. She wore no hat despite the cold. Her pale hair shone in the lantern light. This spectacle has gone far enough, she said. No, Beatrix replied. It has only become visible. Octavia surveyed the crowd. You are frightened. I understand. A harsh winter has caused illness and accidents. Miss Noll, grieving and inexperienced with mountain conditions, has encouraged dangerous rumors. Tessa raised the camera plate. Are these rumors? A farmer held up the barrel seal. Is this? Mirelle stepped forward with her ledger. Octavia's attention fixed on the doctor. Think carefully. I have, Mirel said. Your brother's case can still be reopened. He sent me a telegram this morning. Mirel's voice strengthened. Nerian helped him obtain records proving the warehouse invoices were altered by your accountant after he signed them. He was never guilty of the amount you claimed. For the first time, Octavia looked surprised. Beatrix realized Nerian had been working on more than death records. Octavia recovered quickly. Stolen documents and contaminated samples prove nothing. The survey files in your office will, Lucan said. The sheriff drew his pistol. No one enters that building. Beatrix faced him. Then you acknowledge the files exist. His eyes flicked toward Octavia. Another mistake. The crowd pressed closer. Octavia raised her voice. Anyone who leaves now will face no consequence. Anyone who remains will be charged with riot and theft. No one moved. Beatrix felt Lucan's hand find hers. Octavia looked at them, and her composure finally cracked. You think unity makes you powerful? She asked. Spring is coming. Roads will open. Courts will support the deeds my company purchased. Banks will demand payment. Reporters will leave after a week. You will still need work. You will still need freight. You will still need doctors, supplies, and credit. She pointed toward the mountains. This valley survives because I made it useful. No, Beatrix said. You made it profitable to yourself. I brought industry. You brought poison. I brought progress. Progress that requires graves is only destruction with better advertising. A murmur of agreement moved through the street. Octavia's expression became hard. You are an undertaker. Do not pretend you are qualified to judge commerce, geology, or law. I am qualified to recognize the cost when someone else pays it. The sheriff lifted his pistol higher. Lucan moved in front of Beatrix. Then a shot sounded from the registry roof. Not at the crowd. At the sheriff's feet. Snow scattered around his boots. Everyone looked up. Nerian stood on the roof beside the chimney, holding an old hunting rifle with visibly trembling hands. I would prefer, he called, not to fire again. The crowd erupted. 2 deputies lowered their weapons. The others hesitated. Nerian continued. Copies of the medical ledger, land records, and Silas Noll's notes were sent by telegraph at 4 this afternoon. One set went to the Federal Water Office, another to the state attorney. 3 newspapers received summaries. Octavia's face emptied. You repaired the line, Beatrix said. Nerian adjusted his spectacles. Mostly. It may never send poetry again. The distant whistle of a train echoed from the lower valley. Lucan looked toward the southern ridge. That spur has not carried passengers in years. Tessa smiled. My father sent riders to the railway station. The newspaper in Latham chartered an inspection car. Octavia turned toward her carriage. The crowd closed the street. Move, she ordered. No one did. The sheriff stepped toward his horse. One of his own deputies took his pistol. Not this time, Colm, the deputy said. Octavia looked at Beatrix. You have no idea what you have destroyed. Beatrix thought of Edwin Harrow's broken nails, Ruth Dane's poisoned tonic, the sick children in Pinecross, and Silas's empty coffin. I know exactly what we stopped. Federal inspectors arrived the following morning with 2 state marshals, a railway investigator, and 4 reporters. The search of Calder Vale Development's office produced survey maps, chemical purchase orders, false land appraisals, and coded payments to the sheriff's department. The blue barrels were recovered from the upper springs. Soil and water samples confirmed deliberate contamination. Octavia Pell was arrested while attempting to leave through a freight tunnel beneath her warehouse. Sheriff Vey was charged with bribery, obstruction, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Several company guards agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Nerian emerged from the registry, bruised but cheerful. I have never been arrested before, he told Beatrix. It was less organized than expected. The investigation lasted months. Some truths arrived quickly. Others surfaced piece by piece. The mineral beneath Calder Vale was cobalt-rich ore, valuable for industrial manufacturing. Octavia's company had planned to purchase the watershed cheaply, relocate residents, and sell extraction rights to a larger corporation. When landowners refused, she used contaminated wells to create fear, illness, and financial pressure. Those who discovered too much were threatened or killed. Zordiaman. Dr. Mirelle Astor surrendered her medical license pending review and testified fully. The state board eventually restored it under supervision, acknowledging the coercion but requiring years of public service. Mirelle accepted without complaint. She spent the following spring visiting every affected settlement, documenting illness and arranging treatment funds from seized company assets. Nerian became the temporary county records commissioner. He hated the title and loved the work. Tessa Marrow recovered slowly. Her leg healed with a slight stiffness, but she returned to teaching by autumn. The photographs she had taken appeared in newspapers across the country. One showed company workers standing beside open barrels at the spring. Another showed the avalanche wreckage surrounding the funeral wagon. The image that drew the most attention showed Beatrix carrying Tessa through the snow. Beatrix disliked it. "It makes me look angry," she said. "You were angry," Lucan replied. "I was cold. You can be two things." The newspapers called her the Undertaker of Vesperglass. She called them unimaginative. Quiet Passage funerals became unexpectedly busy, not because more people died, but because families from across the valley trusted Beatrix and Lucan to correct records, relocate graves threatened by contaminated soil, and preserve evidence for civil cases. They worked side by side. Lucan repaired the wagons. Beatrix reorganized the accounts. He taught her to read snow conditions and mountain clouds. She taught him that invoices should be filed in a system more precise than the pile near the stove. They argued about horses, burial routes, mealtimes, and whether tools belonged on hooks. They did not argue about leaving. One evening in late March, as the first thaw began, Lucan found Beatrix standing behind the chapel vault. Silas's coffin had been brought outside. The ground was still partly frozen, but workers had opened a grave beside the stone wall. The coffin remained sealed. Lucan stopped at her side. "You do not have to bury it." "Yes, I do. There is no body. There is a life." Inside the coffin, Beatrix had placed Silas's coat, his ledger, copies of the evidence he had gathered, and the tools he had used as an undertaker. She had also placed the final letter he wrote to her. Lucan looked toward the grave. "The marshals are still searching old mining sites." "I know. They may find him." "I know. Then why now?" "Because I have spent months waiting for proof before allowing myself to grieve. I do not need proof that he is gone." Lucan took her hand. The burial was small. Mirelle came. Nerian read a passage from Silas's notes. Tessa placed a branch of mountain cedar on the coffin. Beatrix spoke last. "My uncle believed duty could replace tenderness," she said. "He was wrong. He believed secrecy could protect the people he loved. He was wrong about that too. But he understood that the dead remain part of our obligations, not because they can reward us, but because truth loses its defenders if the living decide silence is easier." She looked toward the mountains. "Silas left work unfinished. We finished part of it. The rest belongs to everyone who remains." They lowered the coffin. That night, warm rain began to fall. For weeks, crews worked along the watershed, removing contaminated soil and diverting runoff into lined basins. Federal engineers tested wells daily. The spring melt arrived slowly enough for most of the poison to be contained. Not all damage could be undone. Several farms remained unsafe. Some families left permanently. Children required long-term medical care. Lawsuits moved slowly. Men who had followed orders claimed ignorance. Officials who had accepted money claimed they had misunderstood its purpose. Reality did not offer the clean conclusion newspapers preferred. Octavia Pell's trial began the following winter. She was convicted of conspiracy, water contamination, bribery, and multiple counts connected to the deaths. Evidence was insufficient to convict her of every murder, but enough guards and clerks testified to establish a system of threats and deliberate violence. The judge sentenced her to decades in prison. Beatrix attended only one day. She sat behind the Harrow family while a prosecutor described Edwin's refusal to sell his farm. Octavia looked smaller, without her tailored coat and armed men, but not ashamed. During a break, their eyes met. Octavia approached under guard. "You believe you won," she said. Beatrix regarded her calmly. "I believe you were stopped. The company will be sold. Another will come. Then we will watch them. People forget. Undertakers remember." Octavia's mouth tightened. "You could have taken my offer. You would have been wealthy. I already had work worth doing." "That is what poor people tell themselves." Beatrix leaned closer. "No, it is what people with enough learn before people like you do." She left the courthouse and returned to Bellweather. Quiet Passage had changed by then. The roof no longer leaked. The viewing room had new chairs. A proper stove warmed the preparation area. Beatrix's name had been painted beside Lucan's on the sign, both in equal-sized letters. On cold mornings, she managed the dead. On clear afternoons, she rode with Lucan. He never stopped testing the weather by smell. She never stopped mocking him for it. Their affection grew without ceremony. It lived first in practical things. Lucan reinforced the staircase because Beatrix had once complained it creaked beneath clients. She added a padded seat to the driver's bench because his injured hip stiffened in winter. He began leaving tea on her desk during long nights. She repaired the lining of his coat and pretended not to notice when he wore it indoors because it carried her sewing. The first time he kissed her, they were arguing over a hearse wheel. "You tightened it too far," Beatrix said. "It is a wheel. It is an expensive wheel. It will loosen on the road." "Not if fitted correctly. You assume every problem can be corrected by precise preparation. You assume every problem can be dragged across a mountain until it gives up." He stepped closer. "That has worked with you." She looked up at him. "Has it?" "No." "Good." Then he kissed her. It was not delicate. Neither of them was practiced in delicacy. His hands settled at her waist with certainty, not hesitation. Beatrix caught the front of his coat and pulled him closer. When they separated, Lucan looked slightly stunned. "You were saying something about the wheel," she said. "I have forgotten." "It was the first intelligent thing you said all morning." He kissed her again. By the following year, people stopped pretending surprise when they saw them together. There was no grand wedding, neither wanted one. They stood in the chapel on a September afternoon, with Mirelle, Nerian, Tessa, and a handful of friends. Beatrix wore dark blue. Lucan wore the only suit he owned. The pastor began a lengthy speech about obedience, and Beatrix interrupted to say that word would not appear in her vows. Lucan agreed. They promised honesty, work, patience, and the freedom to disagree loudly. Nerian cried. Mirelle claimed dust had entered her eye. Tessa photographed them laughing. Afterward, they served stew and bread in the funeral home's viewing room, which Beatrix considered practical because the chairs were already arranged. Years passed. The contaminated wells recovered slowly. Some never reopened. The valley formed a water council with representatives from every settlement. No company could test, purchase, or alter watershed land without public review. Tessa became its first chairperson. Mirelle established a rural clinic funded by the legal settlement. She never forgave herself entirely, but she stopped confusing punishment with repair. Nerian modernized the county archives, though he continued writing every record by hand before making a duplicate. Lucan remained the best driver in the mountains. Beatrix became the person families called when a death seemed wrong, a certificate seemed careless, or an official answer arrived too easily. She did not solve every mystery. Sometimes an accident was only an accident. Sometimes illness had no villain. Sometimes the truth brought no justice at all. She learned not to promise outcomes. She promised attention. One autumn morning, nearly 10 years after she arrived in Bellweather, a young apprentice asked why Quiet Passage kept Silas's original sign in the office. The paint was cracked. His name had faded. One corner was blackened from the old stove. Beatrix looked through the window. Lucan was harnessing the horses in the yard. His hair had grown grayer. He moved more slowly on cold mornings, though he denied it. Beyond him, Vesperglass Pass shone beneath the rising sun. "Because forgetting is easy," she said. The apprentice waited for more. Beatrix touched the sign. "And because one person can begin a truth without living to see where it leads." That afternoon, she and Lucan drove toward Pinecross to collect the body of an elderly woman who had died peacefully in her own bed. The road was clear. The wells were safe. Children played beside the schoolhouse where Tessa once taught. At the highest turn of the pass, Lucan stopped the wagon. "What is it?" Beatrix asked. He pointed toward the valley. Spring-green fields stretched between dark forests. Rivers caught the light. Smoke rose from chimneys in settlements that had nearly been emptied by fear. Beatrix leaned against his shoulder. "You were wrong," she said. "About what?" "The first day I arrived, you said I could not survive this work. I said you should have stayed in Hartrow. You implied the rest. I was trying to frighten you away. You were not very skilled at it." "No." He kissed the top of her head. "I did not understand you yet. And now I understand enough to remain cautious." She laughed. The horses waited patiently. Below them, Calder Vale continued with its ordinary troubles, its births and funerals, its arguments and repairs. No victory had made the people perfect. No conviction had removed greed from the world. The mountains remained dangerous. The roads still required care. Water still needed testing. Records still needed honest hands. That was the lesson Beatrix carried from the dead into the rest of her life. Evil rarely begins as a grand act performed in full view. It grows through small silences, convenient signatures, frightened compromises, and the belief that someone else will speak first. Courage does not require fearlessness, nor does strength always look the way people expect. It can be a doctor correcting a lie, a clerk preserving a page, a driver carrying evidence through the night, or an undertaker refusing to bury the truth. And when people stand together, even those who seem powerless can become heavier than any burden corruption is prepared to carry.